Right guys, welcome back. Essentially, we are going to be looking at player collection for this one. So, for the sake of this, I'm just going to be using a box, but imagine this being anything that you want. This could be keys, this could be diamonds, this could be coins. It doesn't really matter. They all work the same way. So, to start with, I'm going to do a similar thing to when I created the player. I'm just going to create another random sprite, but this time I'm going to use the square. I'll make this blue for the sake of it, and I'm gonna yet again make it a little bit bigger. I'll just put this one over here. For movement, if you toggle, W is move, E is rotate, and R is to rescale. So when you see me jumping between them, that's what I'm hitting. If you forget them, they're up here anyway, so you can tackle it there. I'm just going to call this prefab underscore, if I can spell, collectible. We are going to add onto this a box collider 2D, and we are going to set this box here to say is trigger. The other thing we're going to do here before we go into code is where it says tag at the top. We're going to click that, and we're going to add a tag. So go to that, then hit this plus, and we are just going to add the tag collectible. If you are having coins in the game or something, you could call it coin. If you're having multiple different things in there, you may have more called collectibles, or you may have different tags for different objects. Entirely up to you. I'm just going to stick quite generic with collectible. And then I'm going to go back to my collectible and make sure that it's got that tag like that. Yep. So, yep, you guessed it, coding time. So right click, create, and C# script. I'm just going to call this player collection, and then I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to double click that and get into some coding. So this is essentially about 4 or 5 lines. It's really not a lot. This will be quite a quick video, this one, to be fair. As usual, we're going to start with declaring some variables. Last time we declared a float and a rigid body. A float, obviously I discussed, was a number that was a decimal, like speed. You know, you don't jump from 10 miles an hour to 11 miles an hour. At some point, you're in like 10.2 miles an hour, aren't you? If you think about it that way. Whereas for this, we're going to set out a public int, and I'm going to go with collection amount is what I'm going to call this. I'm calling this an integer because you can either collect 1 thing, 2 thing, 3. You can't collect 1.5 objects, so we'll keep this as an integer. Just to be on the safe side, in the start function, I'm going to set my collection amount to 0. So if we code something down the line where we die and restart, we start with 0. You don't want to forget something like that, because if your game depends on collection but you don't reset the collection, you can knacker everything. Right, so I'm not actually going to do anything in the update function for this one. I'm going to click just next to this curly bracket at the end of the update function, and I'm just going to give myself some space by pressing enter. One thing to remember with this before I start doing the next bit, this curly bracket up here and this one show the beginning and the end of a script. So whenever you put any code in, if it's after this curly bracket, it's not actually in the script and the engine just won't listen to it. So make sure you're always in this area. So I'm going to put in something called a void on trigger enter. I'm going to go for the 2D version, and then it's going to tell me everything's wrong because I've typed it like that. So a void on trigger enter 2D. I'm going to add myself some space in here. Essentially what this function does is exactly what you're thinking it does. This detects if we hit a trigger. If you remember on the box collider of the square, we set that to be a trigger. So this is just purely checking, has the player hit a trigger? It's as simple as that. But we need to figure out which trigger we've hit. So this is where we come in with an if statement. So if other dot compare tag, which does exactly what you think it does, collectible. I think that's what I called it. Make sure that this is spelled exactly the same way as this tag here. If it's even the casing, if the casing's different, it won't work. So make sure capitals are in the right places and you spell it right. If you spell it wrong in the tag, spell it wrong here as well. That's how code works. So we're going to end that sentence not with a semicolon like normal, but with an open and close curly bracket, because we're doing something with this line. We don't want it to end there. We want to do something with this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go with collection amount plus plus and then semicolon. All this does is it adds 1 to the collection amount. We could do collection amount equals collection amount plus 1, but for the sake of it, we may as well have plus plus. If you were going to have it so that your collection added 10 or 2 or 5, you could have that line of code I was just on about. But if we're just adding 1, then we'll, that's what we'll do. There is one other line of code to add in here, but I'm going to show you this line working and then we'll come back. So let's drop back into Unity. We should have all of this set up. One thing not to forget is to drag that script onto the player, or else it just won't do anything. And we should see 0. And keep an eye on here, because essentially if it works, which we know, there we go, we just hit 1. But, and this is where this other line comes in, if I go back over it, our collection's just going up and up and up. So what we've coded so far works. We just need to go back in and we need to add one more line, which is a destroy function. So there we go, destroy other.game object. We are referencing the other trigger as other because of this here, and we are referencing the collider on the object, not the object itself. So by saying other.game object, we are saying whatever that collider I've just hit is attached to, destroy everything. So if I go back into here, there we go. So I've hit it, my collection's gone up, and that's disappeared. So there we go, that works. I am going to do a video at some point on UI, but for the time being, we've got a working collection system. UI is a different kettle of fish. So in the next video, I'm going to go through a live system, just because it is very similar to what we've just done, and you'll see that when I do it. So yeah, I'll catch you in the next video. As I say, a shortish video, but that seems to all be working. So I'll catch you then, guys.